I'm Stephen Ezell. I'm the Vice President of Global Innovation Policy at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. We're a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit, nonpartisan science and technology policy think tank. So it hasn't always been the case, but today the United States leads the world in biomedical innovation. In fact, over the past 2 decades, U.S. headquartered companies have invented more new drugs and therapies than companies from the next 5 nations combined. The U.S. has been responsible for 70% of global biomedical research over that time, contributing to the fact that today we have 3,400 new drugs under development, including 560 drugs for rare diseases. And in fact, in 2015, 47% of novel new drug approvals were for rare diseases. Of course, these are diseases that affect less than 200,000 patients. But unfortunately, we still have a lot of work to do. Rare diseases affect 1 in 10, or 30 million Americans, yet only 5% of the 7,000 identified rare diseases have an FDA-approved treatment today. So we have a lot more work to do. As I said, the U.S. wasn't always the world's leader in biomedical innovation. In fact, in the 1990s, only 15% of new drugs introduced to the world were introduced in the United States first. But America's leadership since then is a result of coherent and coordinated policy, regulatory, and commercial environment that, as ITAF writes in its report, Why Life Sciences Innovation is Politically Purple, which is outside on the table, America's leadership really rests on a bipartisan policy framework with 4 key pillars. The first is robust public and private investment in scientific research, including about $30 billion a year from NIH and $70 billion from the private sector. It's critical to recognize that these investments are complementary. In fact, every $1 of NIH support for medical research leads to an increase in private medical research of an additional 32 cents. These are complements, not substitutes. The role of NIH in funding basic scientific research and in the private sector in doing clinical trials and developing new drugs from it is critical to our success, and we shouldn't be thinking that the NIH is an agency that can do drug development. Secondly, as Beth said, providing incentives to invest in rare disease research. Policies like the Orphan Drug Act, the Orphan Drug Tax Credit, have been instrumental in facilitating R&D into these diseases affecting small patient populations. We shouldn't forget the effect of the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, PDUFA, as well, which, as you know, is up for renewal, PDUFA 6, before Congress right now. In fact, in 1991, the year before the first PDUFA was introduced in 1992, it took 33 months for the Food and Drug Administration to make a determination approval on the safety and efficacy of a new drug. Today, that's down to just 10 months. So the role of PDUFA in providing funding for the FDA so it can make timely determinations is vital. And fourth, of course, providing robust intellectual property protections for biomedical research. IP rights are vital for life sciences innovation for 4 fundamental reasons. First, what we're talking about in America's life sciences industry is America's most R&D intensive sector, investing 21% of its sales year over year and accounting for a full 25% of all R&D that's invested by U.S. companies. America's life sciences companies are investing in innovation, not profit maximization. As the representative said, drug development is a risky, uncertain, and expensive process, and these companies need the ability to recoup their expensive upfront investments with IP rights that protect the ability to generate the returns. It's also important to recognize that innovators depend on the profits from one generation of successful innovation to provide the funds to invest in the next generation of innovation. So what are the key IP rights for the life sciences sector and rare diseases in particular? Obviously, patents, which protect the underlying chemical or molecule behind the drug, but orphan drug exclusivity rights granted to drugs approved to treat rare diseases upon marketing approval are vital because they essentially preclude the FDA from approving any other drug for the same disease for a 7-year period. It's important to recognize that this is not a monopoly because other companies can develop a new drug, a novel formulation that treats the same disease, but this exclusivity period gives innovators the time after a drug goes off patent to have a kind of exclusivity insurance and know that they have a significant and sufficient amount of time that they can recoup their expensive upfront investments. So let me conclude then by making 3 policy recommendations that are vital for the rare disease community and for the broader life sciences industry in the United States. First, policymakers really need to continue to support robust federal investment in life sciences research. From 2004 to 2014, NIH funding in real terms declined by 13%. So we're pleased that Congress, in the recent budget, put back an additional $2 billion in funding for the NIH. Second, we should look to expand investments for orphan drug research. The Open Act, which we'll hear about later, would provide 6 months of extended exclusivity for FDA-approved drugs that are repurposed for a new rare disease indication. And we've had significant success with similar initiatives in the past. For example, as we'll hear, the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, which provided an ability to take existing indications and apply them to pediatric drugs with a 6-month exclusivity window, actually resulted in over 600 labeling changes for new pediatric indications. So providing additional exclusivity periods have been good for pediatric drugs and can be good for orphan drugs and rare diseases as well. And finally, let me just say that broadly, yes, we need to work to make medicines more affordable for all Americans. And there are a number of policy procedures we can pursue in that regard. But we shouldn't do so at the expense of an IP and innovation system that has been really successful in creating a number of innovative treatments for patients like Ellie. And we need to worry about those in the future that we don't also have solutions for. So thank you very much.